The massive alien starship hung in Earth's orbit like a sleeping giant made of crystal and shadow. For 3 months, it had done absolutely nothing. No communication, no movement, no sign of life at all. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation window of Station Alpha, watching the ship through her binoculars. The vessel was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It stretched nearly 2 kilometers long, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change when you weren't looking directly at them. "Still giving you the creeps?" asked Commander Jake Morrison as he floated up beside her. In the zero gravity of the space station, everyone moved like graceful dancers, even the tough military types like Jake. Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the alien ship. "It's not natural, Jake. Something that big doesn't just sit there. Every scan we've run shows it's completely powered down, dead as space itself. But I can feel it watching us." Jake laughed, but it sounded forced. "Ships don't watch people, Doc. They're just machines." "Are they?" Sarah turned to face him, her dark eyes intense. "We've been assuming this thing works like our technology, but what if it doesn't? What if it's not just a ship at all?" Before Jake could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the automated voice system kicked in. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown energy signature detected. All personnel to emergency stations." Sarah and Jake pushed off from the observation window and flew down the corridor toward the command center. Other crew members were doing the same, their faces tight with worry. After 3 months of nothing, any change felt dangerous. The command center buzzed with activity. Screens showed readouts that made no sense, and technicians called out readings that seemed impossible. "Report." Jake barked as he grabbed a handheld and strapped himself into the commander's chair. Lieutenant Torres, the station's sensor specialist, looked up from her console with wide eyes. "Sir, the alien vessel just woke up. Power levels are climbing rapidly. But here's the weird part, it's not doing anything with that power, it's just building it up." Sarah floated over to look at the sensor data herself. The numbers were incredible. The alien ship was generating more energy than Earth's entire power grid, but it wasn't moving, wasn't transmitting, wasn't doing anything visible at all. "How long until it reaches maximum power?" Jake asked. "At this rate?" "Maybe 6 hours, Torres replied. "But sir, there's something else. The energy pattern, it's not random. It's like a heartbeat, slow and steady, getting stronger with each pulse." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Jake, we need to evacuate the station now." "Evacuation? Based on what? The thing still hasn't made any hostile moves." "That's exactly why we should be worried," Sarah insisted. "Something with that much power doesn't need to make hostile moves. It could vaporize us without even trying." Jake looked around the command center. 23 people called this station home. Good people, scientists, engineers, pilots, his people. The decision to evacuate would end their mission and might trigger a panic on Earth. But as he watched the power readings climb higher and higher, he realized Sarah was right. Whatever was happening up there, they were too close to survive it. If things went wrong. "All right, people," Jake announced over the intercom. "We're implementing emergency evacuation protocol. All non-essential personnel to the escape pods immediately. Essential crew, prepare for rapid departure." The station exploded into controlled chaos. People grabbed emergency kits and personal items, moving with practiced efficiency toward the evacuation bays. But even as they prepared to leave, everyone kept glancing at the screen showing the alien ship. Sarah stayed at the sensor console, watching the readings with growing fascination and terror. The ship's power output was beyond anything humanity could produce, but the pattern was definitely organic. It pulsed like a living thing. "Sarah," Jake called from across the room. "You're on the first pod out of here." "Wait," she said, not looking, away from the screen. "Jake, look at this. The power buildup, it's not random, it's searching for something." "Searching for what?" "I don't know, but—" Sarah's words were cut off as every screen in the command center suddenly went black. Then slowly symbols began appearing. Not human symbols, something else entirely. The symbols moved and shifted, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. But somehow, Sarah found herself understanding them. Not translating them, but actually understanding them as if they were written in her native language. "My God," she whispered. "It's trying to communicate." Jake grabbed her shoulder. "Sarah, we don't have time for this. The last pod leaves in 2 minutes." But Sarah couldn't move. The symbols on the screen were telling a story of a ship that had traveled across the galaxy, not to invade or conquer, but to find something it had been searching for across thousands of years and countless worlds. And now, finally it had found what it was looking for. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Jake," she said quietly, "it's not searching for something, it's searching for someone." "What do you mean?" Sarah turned to face him, her face pale with understanding. "The ship isn't responding to our technology or our signals. It's responding to us, to humans. It's been waiting for us specifically." The screens flickered again, and new symbols appeared. These were different, urgent, almost excited. The ship's power levels spiked dramatically, and for the first time in 3 months the massive vessel began to move. It was turning to face Earth. Chapter 2. The Awakening Protocol. The alien starship rotated with impossible grace, its crystalline hull catching and reflecting Earth's sunlight in patterns that made Sarah's eyes water. As it moved, space itself seemed to ripple around it, as if the ship existed partially outside normal reality. "All stations, this is Morrison," Jake spoke into his headset while pulling Sarah toward the evacuation bay. "The package is active and moving." "Repeat, the package is active. All Earth defense grids are to maintain yellow alert status. Do not, repeat, do not fire unless fired upon." Sarah dug her heels in and stopped their forward motion. "Jake, we can't leave now. This is the most important moment in human history." "Which is exactly why you need to survive it," Jake replied firmly. "The pods are equipped with full sensor arrays. You can study this thing from a safe distance." But, as they argued, the ship's movement suddenly stopped. It hung there, pointed directly at Earth like a massive arrow. The power readings stabilized at levels that made their instruments scream warnings about potential energy overload. Then, something incredible happened. Every communication device on Station Alpha activated at once. Radios, computers, even the coffee maker's digital display, everything that could show information suddenly displayed the same message in perfect English. "Human Sarah Chen, come aboard. Others remain at distance. Come alone. Great importance." The command center fell completely silent except for the humming of electronics. Everyone stared at the displays, then at Sarah, then back at the displays. "Well," Jake said after a long moment, "that's new." Sarah felt her heart hammering in her chest. The alien ship knew her name. Somehow it had identified her specifically out of billions of humans and 7 billion pieces of electronic communication happening on Earth at any given moment. "How?" she whispered. "How does it know who I am?" Lieutenant Torres cleared her throat nervously. "Dr. Chen, your research papers on xenobiology and interstellar communication theory have been broadcast into space as part of the SETI beacon transmissions for the past 5 years. If this ship has been monitoring our communications, it would have read everything I've ever published," Sarah finished. "My theories about how alien civilizations might make contact, my work on universal communication protocols." She paused, a terrible thought occurring to her. "My personal data that's attached to every academic paper, name, institution, even photographs." The displays flickered again, and new text appeared. "Sarah Chen understands. Sarah Chen is ready. Come now. Time is short." Jake grabbed Sarah's. "Absolutely not. We don't send our people onto alien ships based on polite invitations, especially not alone." "But what if this is exactly what we've been preparing for?" Sarah argued. "Every protocol we've developed for first contact assumes they'll want to communicate with our leaders or our military. But what if they want to talk to someone who's spent their entire career thinking about how to communicate with them?" The ship's power levels suddenly spiked again and the displays changed. Others in great danger. Sarah Chen can prevent. Must come now. 12 minutes remain. 12 minutes until what? Jake muttered. But Sarah was already moving toward the equipment lockers. I'm going, she announced, pulling on an EVA suit. Jake, this isn't a request from an alien ship, it's a warning. Something's coming, and somehow I'm the key to stopping it. Sarah, this is insane. We don't know anything about their atmosphere, their biology, their intentions. Their intentions are clear, Sarah interrupted, while checking her suit's systems. They've had 3 months to attack us if they wanted. 2 instead they waited. They've been waiting for the right person to make contact. That person is me. Jake looked around the command center at his remaining crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. He was their commander, responsible for their safety and the success of their mission. But he was also Sarah's friend, and the thought of sending her alone onto an alien vessel made him sick. The displays flickered once more. 10 minutes. Choose quickly. Sir, Torres said quietly. Maybe we should contact Earth Command for orders. No time, Jake replied. He looked at Sarah, who was now fully suited up and heading for the airlock. Sarah, wait. If you're going to do this crazy thing, you're taking a communication relay and an emergency beacon. And if anything at all feels wrong, you activate that beacon and get out of there. Sarah nodded and clipped the devices to her suit. Jake, if something happens to me, make sure Earth knows what we learned here. The ship isn't just alien technology. It's been specifically looking for humans. For me. That means there's something about us, about humanity, that's important to them. Or something about you specifically that's important, Jake replied grimly. Sarah paused at the airlock door. Maybe, but I think it's bigger than that. I think humanity is about to become part of something much larger than we ever imagined. She sealed her helmet and stepped into the airlock. Through the small window, Jake could see her checking her equipment one final time. Then she looked back at him and gave a thumbs-up sign. See you soon, Jake, her voice came through the radio. You better, he replied. That's an order. The outer airlock door opened and Sarah Chen stepped out into the void between worlds, heading toward an alien starship that had traveled across the galaxy to find her. As she drifted toward the massive vessel, its surface began to change. Panels slid aside with liquid smoothness, revealing an opening just large enough for one person. Soft blue light emanated from within, and Sarah could see what looked like a corridor stretching into the ship's interior. Sarah, are you getting this? Jake's voice crackled over the radio. Copy that. The ship is... It's beautiful, Jake. Not just alien, but beautiful. Like it was grown rather than built. As Sarah approached the opening, she realized the corridor inside was filled with breathable atmosphere. Her suit's sensors detected oxygen, nitrogen, and trace gases at exactly the right mixture for human survival. They've prepared for me, she whispered in amazement. Somehow they know exactly what I need to survive. She passed through the opening, and it sealed behind her with barely a whisper. The corridor ahead curved gently downward, lit by the same soft blue glow. The walls were covered in the shifting patterns she'd seen on the ship's exterior, but now they seemed to be moving with purpose, like visual language. Sarah, we're losing your signal. Jake's voice was fading with static. I'm okay, she replied, though she wasn't sure he could hear her anymore. The ship is isolating me from outside communication, but I think that's part of the plan. As she walked deeper into the ship, Sarah began to understand that she wasn't just visiting alien technology. She was being drawn into something that would change humanity forever. And somewhere ahead, in the heart of the crystal starship, something ancient and powerful was waiting to meet her. Chapter 3. The Heart of Stars. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that defied all logic. Sarah's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. The space was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium, but somehow it had fit inside the ship without making the exterior any larger. Impossible, she whispered, then remembered that she was dealing with a civilization advanced enough to cross the galaxy. Maybe impossible was just another word for technology we don't understand yet. The chamber was filled with floating platforms connected by streams of light that moved like living things. In the center, rising from a pool of what looked like liquid starlight, was a structure that reminded Sarah of both a tree and a cathedral. Its branches reached toward the ceiling, which wasn't a ceiling at all, but an opening to space that somehow didn't vent the atmosphere. And standing beside the tree cathedral, waiting for her, was a figure that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to be made of the same shifting patterns as the ship's hull. Its eyes were large and completely black, like pools of space itself. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, resonating through the chamber and through Sarah's bones. "Sarah Chen," it said, and her name sounded like music in its alien voice. "You have come. We have waited so long." Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" "We are the gardeners," the being replied. "We plant seeds across the galaxy and tend them as they grow. Some seeds become great civilizations. Others wither and die. A few, very few, become something more." The being gestured to the tree cathedral, and Sarah saw that it wasn't just decorative. Inside its crystalline branches, she could see images, playing like three-dimensional movies. Planets, species, entire civilizations rising and falling across thousands of years. "You're watching them," Sarah realized. "All of them. How many civilizations have you gardened?" 743 species have reached the stars under our guidance," the gardener replied. "Most were content to remain within their home systems, building peaceful societies and exploring the mysteries of existence. 57 became explorers, spreading across the galaxy to find new worlds. 12 became warriors, conquering other species until they destroyed themselves." Sarah stepped closer to the tree cathedral, watching the images of alien civilizations. Some looked familiar: tool users, builders, creators. Others were so alien she couldn't even guess at their nature. "And humans? Which category do we fall into?" The gardener's expression, if it could be called an expression, seemed to shift into something like sadness. "Humans are different, Sarah Chen. In 743 attempts, we have never encountered a species like yours." "Different how?" Instead of answering directly, the gardener raised its hand, and the images in the tree changed. Now, Sarah was looking at Earth, but not the Earth she knew. This was Earth from space, showing the lights of cities, the movement of aircraft, the signals of countless radio and television transmissions spreading out into space. "Other species, when they reach your level of development, begin to stabilize," the gardener explained. "They develop sustainable technologies, unified governments, and peaceful relationships with their neighbors. They stop growing and start maintaining." The images shifted to show other planets, other civilizations that had reached similar levels of technology. They were beautiful, organized, peaceful. But they were also static, unchanging. "But humans do not stabilize," the gardener continued. "You continue to grow, to change, to reach for things beyond your grasp. You create art that serves no survival purpose. You explore dangerous places because they are there. You ask questions that have no answers." Sarah found herself smiling despite the seriousness of the situation. "You make it sound like we're crazy." "Not crazy," the gardener replied. "Dangerous." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah felt her smile fade. "Dangerous to whom?" The gardener gestured again, and the images in the tree changed to show something that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was space, but not empty space. This region was filled with ships, millions upon millions of them, all moving in the same direction like a vast migration. "The devourers," the gardener said simply. "They consume civilizations, adding their knowledge and resources to their collective. They have destroyed entire spiral arms of the galaxy, turning thriving systems into empty void." Sarah watched in horror as the images showed planet after planet being stripped bare, their populations absorbed into the massive fleet. "How long do we have?" "They will reach this sector in 18 of your months," the gardener replied. Every civilization they have encountered has fallen to them. The peaceful ones lack the will to fight. The warrior races burn themselves out in hopeless battles. The explorers flee to the edges of the galaxy and hide. But humans are different, Sarah said, beginning to understand. Yes. Humans fight when fighting is hopeless. Humans adapt when adaptation should be impossible. Humans create when creation serves no purpose except beauty. The gardener moved closer to her, and Sarah could see something like hope in those deep black eyes. We believe humans might be the first species capable of stopping the devourers. Sarah felt the weight of entire civilizations settling on her shoulders. What do you need from us? Partnership, the gardener replied. We have knowledge, technology, and resources beyond your current understanding. But we lack something that humans possess in abundance, the ability to imagine impossible solutions and then make them real. Faux. Tree Cathedral pulsed with light, and Sarah realized it wasn't just showing her images, it was offering her something. Knowledge, understanding, the accumulated wisdom of 743 civilizations. If I accept this, she said slowly, what happens to humanity? Do we become like the others, peaceful and stable, and static? That choice remains yours, the gardener replied. We do not control the civilizations we guide. We simply offer them the tools to grow beyond what they could achieve alone. How they use those tools is their decision. Sarah looked at the images of approaching destruction, then at the peaceful civilizations that had chosen safety over growth. She thought about Earth, about all the messy, chaotic, beautiful humanity she'd left behind. Jake. She spoke into her, communicator, hoping somehow the signal would reach him. If you can hear this, tell Earth we have 18 months to prepare for the most important fight in human history. And tell them we're not facing it alone. She turned back to the gardener. I accept your partnership, but I have conditions. The alien being tilted its head in what might have been curiosity. Speak your conditions. First, humans remain human. We keep our chaos, our creativity, our tendency to ask inconvenient questions. Second, this partnership works both ways. You learn from us just like we learn from you. And third, Sarah paused, thinking of Jake and Torres and all the people she'd left on Station Alpha. We do this together. Not just you and me, but our species. All of humanity gets to be part of this decision. The gardener was silent for a long moment, and Sarah wondered if she had just doomed her entire species by making demands of beings who could probably crush Earth without effort. Then the gardener did something Sarah hadn't expected. It smiled. Sarah, Chen, it said, we chose the right species to ask for help. The tree cathedral pulsed with light again, and Sarah felt knowledge flowing into her mind. Not overwhelming, not painful, but like remembering something she had always known. She understood now how to communicate with the ship, how to access its databases, how to begin the process of preparing humanity for what was coming. But more than that, she understood that humanity was about to become part of something magnificent and terrible and absolutely necessary. The age of human isolation was ending. The age of human responsibility was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Price of Partnership. Sarah's mind reeled as centuries of knowledge flowed into her consciousness. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, and the slow, inexorable advance of the devourers across the galaxy. But most importantly, she began to understand what it would take to stop them. The knowledge is overwhelming. At first, the gardener said gently, steadying her as she swayed on her feet. Your mind will adapt. Humans are remarkably good at adaptation. How many others have you offered this to? Sarah asked, her voice hoarse from the shock of expanded awareness. You are the first, the gardener replied. Other species we approached, their governments, their military leaders, their councils of wisdom. But humans are different. Humans need someone who can bridge the gap between scientific understanding and intuitive leaps of faith. Sarah looked around the vast chamber with new eyes. She could see now that the ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a library, a workshop, and a seed bank all in one. The gardeners didn't just watch civilizations grow, they preserved everything they learned from each one. The tree, she said, pointing to the cathedral-like structure. It's not just storing images, it's storing the essence of every civilization you've encountered. Their art, their music, their ways of thinking about the universe, the gardener confirmed. When the Devourers destroy a civilization, we ensure that their contributions to galactic culture survive. But we have never been able to save the civilizations themselves. Sarah walked closer to the tree, and as she did, she began to hear something impossible. Music. Not human music, but the songs of dozens of different species, all blending together in a harmony that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. They're still here, she whispered in amazement. Not just their records, but something of them. Their voices. Knowledge without wisdom is sterile, the gardener explained. Wisdom without knowledge is powerless. The tree preserves both, allowing each civilization to contribute to those who come after. A terrible thought occurred to Sarah. If humanity fails, if the Devourers destroy us too, is this all that will remain? Our songs in an alien tree? Perhaps, the gardener admitted. But perhaps not. Humans have already surprised us in ways no other species has. You are the first to ask about the price of our partnership before accepting it. You are the first to demand conditions. You are the first to insist that your entire species be part of the decision. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling more heavily on her shoulders. What exactly are you asking us to do? Fight the Devourers directly? The gardener gestured, and the images in the tree changed to show tactical displays that looked like the most complex video game Sarah had ever seen. Ships, planets, and resources were arrayed across multiple star systems, all connected by lines that showed supply chains, communication networks, and strategic relationships. The Devourers cannot be defeated by any single civilization, the gardener explained. They adapt too quickly, learn too efficiently. But they have one weakness. They assume that all civilizations will respond to threats in predictable ways. And humans don't respond predictably. Exactly. The Devourers will expect you to either surrender, flee, or fight conventionally. They will not expect you to do all three simultaneously while also attempting something that should be impossible. Sarah studied the tactical displays, and slowly a plan began to form in her mind. Not a plan she could have conceived with only human knowledge, but one that combined human instincts with gardener wisdom. You want us to be bait, she realized. Draw them into a trap, while the other civilizations prepare for a coordinated counterattack. Partly correct, the gardener replied, but also more complex than that. We want you to be the chaos factor that disrupts their calculations. While they focus on trying to understand and counter your unpredictable tactics, the surviving civilizations will have time to implement strategies they could never have used before. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. Because we'll be teaching them to think like humans, to embrace chaos instead of avoiding it. Yes. And in return, we will teach you to build technologies and strategies that can actually threaten the Devourers. The implications were staggering. Humanity wouldn't just be fighting for their own survival. They'd be fighting to save an entire galaxy. And they'd be doing it by sharing their greatest weakness, their inability to be predicted or controlled, as their greatest strength. Jake. Sarah spoke into her communicator again, hoping that somehow the ship would relay her message. I know you can't hear me yet, but I need you to know something. When I come back, I'm going to ask Earth to do something that sounds completely insane. I need you to trust me. She turned back to the gardener. How do we start? We start with knowledge, the gardener replied. I will share with you the locations of 17 civilizations that have successfully hidden from the Devourers. Your people will need to make contact with them, learn their technologies, and convince them to fight instead of hide. And if they refuse, then humanity faces the Devourers alone, as every other civilization has. The difference is that you will face them with knowledge of their weaknesses and technologies they have never encountered before. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I accept. But I need something from you first. The gardener waited. I need proof, something I can take back to Earth that will convince them this is real. Because if I go back and tell them that aliens want our help to fight other aliens in a galactic war, they're going to think I've lost my mind. The gardener considered this for a moment, then moved to the tree cathedral. It placed its hand on the crystalline surface, and one of the branches detached itself, flowing like liquid before solidifying into a small, intricate device. This contains partial specifications for technologies your people will need, the gardener explained, handing the device to Sarah. Power generation systems beyond your current understanding. Propulsion methods that can move ships across galactic distances. Communication technologies that work instantly across any distance. Sarah examined the device. It was beautiful, covered in the same shifting patterns as the ship's hull, but small enough to fit in her palm. This is going to change everything. Yes, the gardener agreed. And change is what humans do better than any species we have encountered. The question is, will you change quickly enough? As if summoned by the question, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The gardener's expression shifted to something Sarah interpreted as concern. What's happening? Long-range sensors detect Devourer scout ships at the edge of this star system, the gardener replied grimly. They are 18 months ahead of schedule. Your people have perhaps 6 months to prepare, not 18. Sarah felt her heart sink. 6 months to convince Earth's governments to work together. 6 months to build impossible technologies. 6 months to make contact with alien civilizations and convince them to abandon millennia of successful hiding strategies. Can we do it? She asked. The gardener looked at her with those deep black eyes, and for the first time, Sarah saw something she recognized as very human uncertainty. Sarah Chen, it said quietly, we are about to find out exactly what humans can accomplish when the impossible is their only option. The ship began to move, turning away from Earth and toward the edge of the solar system. Sarah realized she was being taken back to Station Alpha, back to Jake and her colleagues, back to the beginning of the most important conversation in human history. In her hand, the alien device pulsed with gentle light, carrying within it the keys to humanity's salvation or destruction. The real work was about to begin. Epilogue. The human factor. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the newly constructed war room beneath NORAD, watching as representatives from every major nation on Earth argued about technologies that shouldn't exist and threats that sounded like science fiction. The alien device had worked exactly as promised. Earth's brightest minds had spent weeks studying its contents, and the implications had rippled through every scientific community on the planet. Clean energy that could power entire cities. Propulsion systems that could send ships to nearby stars in months instead of decades. Communication arrays that could maintain instant contact across interstellar distances. But the greatest revelation had been the star charts. The scout ships are confirmed, General Harrison announced to the assembled group. 3 vessels, each roughly the size of Manhattan, detected at the edge of the Oort cloud. They're not advancing, just watching. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of world leaders, scientists, and military officials. Some showed fear, others determination, and a few displayed the kind of eager excitement that had driven humans to explore dangerous places since the dawn of civilization. Dr. Chen, said President Martinez, your gardener friends, are they still willing to help us? They never left, Sarah replied. Their ship has been joined by 2 others. They're sharing technologies and strategic information as quickly as we can process it. But they've made it clear that this fight belongs to us. They can advise and support, but they can't fight our battles for us. And the other civilizations? The ones in hiding? Sarah smiled grimly. That's where it gets interesting. We've made contact with 5 of them so far. 3 have agreed to share defensive technologies but won't commit to fighting. 1 has offered to provide safe haven for human refugees if we lose. And 1, she paused, remembering the conversation that had surprised everyone, including the gardeners. One is asked to join our military forces directly. Apparently, they've been hiding for 3,000 years and they're tired of running. Jake, who had been promoted to serve as Sarah's military liaison, leaned forward. What about the Devourers themselves? Any new intelligence? The gardeners believe the scout ships are confused, Sarah replied. They expected to find either a peaceful civilization ready for absorption or a warrior race burning itself out in futile resistance. Instead, they're seeing something unprecedented, a species that's simultaneously preparing for war, reaching out to potential allies and developing technologies at an impossible rate. In other words, General Harrison said dryly, we're giving them exactly the kind of headache the gardeners hoped for. More than that, Sarah said, accessing the holographic display in the center of the room. Intelligence from the gardeners suggests the scout ships have been sending increasingly confused reports back to the main Devourer fleet. They can't categorize us, which means they can't predict us. The hologram showed the current positions of known Devourer forces, human preparations, and allied civilizations. It looked like the setup for the most complex chess game ever played, with pieces that could move in ways no one fully understood. There's something else, Sarah continued. The gardeners have detected unusual activity in the sectors that the Devourers have already consumed. They think our unpredictable behavior is having effects beyond just confusing the scout ships. What kind of effects? President Martinez asked. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the part that had kept her awake for the past week. They think the Devourers might be reconsidering their entire approach to this sector of the galaxy. Not just how to defeat us, but whether absorption is the right strategy at all. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Devourers had been following the same pattern for millennia. Find, evaluate, absorb, move on. But humans weren't fitting the pattern. So what happens now? Asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Earth's newly appointed director of xenological studies. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of people who had, in just 3 months, accepted the reality of galactic politics and humanity's role in the largest conflict in galactic history. Now we do what humans do best, she said. We improvise, we adapt, we try things that shouldn't work and make them work anyway, and we hope that our greatest weakness, our inability to do anything the easy way, turns out to be our greatest strength. Jake stood up, his expression serious but determined. The first joint human-alien training exercises begin next week. 500 volunteers from militaries around the world, working alongside advisors from 3 different species to develop tactics that have never been tried before. And the technology transfers, General Harrison asked. Proceeding faster than anyone thought possible, Dr. Tanaka replied. Human engineers are adapting alien designs with modifications that the original creators never considered. We're not just copying their technology, we're improving it. Sarah felt a familiar warmth in her chest, the same feeling she'd had as a child when she looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Now she knew, and it was stranger, more dangerous, and more wonderful than she had ever imagined. The gardeners told me something before I left their ship, she said. In all their centuries of watching civilizations rise and fall, they've learned that survival isn't about being the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced. It's about being the most adaptable. She paused, looking at each person in the room. Humans have been adapting to impossible situations since we first walked out of Africa and decided to explore the entire planet. Now we're going to adapt to impossible situations on a galactic scale. President Martinez stood up, and the rest of the room followed. Dr. Chen, on behalf of Earth and humanity, I want to thank you for bringing us this opportunity. Opportunity? Sarah almost laughed. Ma'am, we're facing the most dangerous force in the galaxy with 6 months to prepare and allies who have been running and hiding for thousands of years. Exactly, President Martinez replied with a smile that was pure, human determination. When has humanity ever backed down from a challenge just because it was impossible? As the meeting ended and people began filing out to return to their various preparations, Sarah remained behind, staring at the holographic display. The Devourer scout ships were still there, still watching, still trying to figure out what humanity was going to do next. The truth was, she didn't know either. But for the first time since she'd stepped aboard that alien ship, she felt something that surprised her. Hope. Not because humanity had a good chance of winning. The odds were still astronomical against them. But because for the first time, in galactic history, the outcome wasn't predetermined. The Devourers had never faced a species that responded to existential threats by becoming more creative instead of more desperate. Jake approached her as the room emptied. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. The Gardner ship wants to speak with you again. Privately." Sarah looked at him with concern. "Bad news?" "I don't think so." But they seemed excited, which is apparently unusual for beings who've lived for thousands of years. An hour later, Sarah found herself back aboard the Gardner vessel, standing once again in the vast chamber with the tree cathedral. But this time, she wasn't alone. The gardener who had first spoken to her was there, along with two others she hadn't met before. "Sarah Chen," the first gardener said, "we have news that changes everything." "The Devourers?" she asked, feeling her stomach tighten. "Not the Devourers," replied one of the new gardeners. "The hidden civilizations. Word of humanity's response has spread faster than we anticipated. 17 civilizations that have been in hiding are now requesting direct contact with Earth." Sarah blinked in surprise. 17, but that's all of them. "Yes," the third gardener said. And Sarah could swear she detected something like amusement in its voice. "It seems that after millennia of running and hiding, they have decided that humanity's approach to impossible problems is worth trying. But there's more," the first gardener continued. 3 civilizations that were absorbed by the Devourers over a century ago have sent covert messages. They still exist within the Devourer collective, and they want to coordinate resistance from within. Sarah felt the magnitude of what was happening wash over her. "You're telling me that humanity's decision to fight has inspired a galaxy-wide rebellion?" "Not inspired," the first gardener corrected. "Enabled. These civilizations have wanted to fight back for centuries, but they lacked a crucial element that humans possess naturally, which is the willingness to attempt strategies that have no guarantee of success." Sarah looked at the tree cathedral, where new images were now playing. Ships from dozens of different species, all moving toward a common destination. Not fleeing, not hiding, but advancing toward the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. "The Devourers won't know what hit them," she murmured. "Perhaps," the first gardener replied. "But Sarah Chen, you must understand. This changes the nature of the conflict entirely. It is no longer about whether humanity can survive the Devourers. It is about whether the galaxy itself can be freed from their influence." Sarah felt the weight of galactic history settling on her shoulders once again. But this time, it felt different. Not like a burden, but like responsibility shared among billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "When do we begin?" she asked. "We already have," the gardener replied. "The moment you agreed to our partnership. The moment your species chose to fight rather than submit or flee. The moment you convinced other civilizations that impossible victories are possible. That was when the real war began." Sarah looked out through the chamber's impossible opening at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were recalculating their strategies, trying to understand how a single species had turned their predetermined conquest into the galaxy's first real chance for freedom. "Jake was right," she said quietly. "This really is the most important moment in human history." "Not just human history," the gardener replied. "Galactic history. And it all began when one human woman decided to step aboard an alien ship and ask the right questions." Sarah smiled, thinking of all the impossible things humanity was about to attempt. "Well," she said, "asking inconvenient questions is what we do best." Behind her, the tree cathedral pulsed with the accumulated wisdom of 743 civilizations, and for the first time in millennia, their combined voice sang not of loss and preservation, but of hope and the possibility of victory. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they said impossible was just another word for difficult, and the Devourers were about to discover that some species respond to overwhelming odds by becoming more dangerous, not lest the age of hiding was over, the age of fighting back had begun. The end.